What's up, Sussex? Welcome to another episode of I Am Sussex. I am here with our guest today, Rony Baltazar-Lopez. Ronnie, how are you today?
I'm doing good. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for being here, man. I just want to start off by saying thank you for the service that you have provided to the local community, brother. Thank you, man. This has been a long time coming, man. Thank you for being on the show. So let's get started. Why Sussex?
A little bit about myself. My parents immigrated here in the 90s. My mom is from Mexico, and my dad is from Guatemala. And they came here with nothing but dreams and aspirations to better themselves, better the lives of their, families. And when they came here, they came to particularly Sussex because this is where the jobs were for them. And fast forward, 1995, they met and they had me. And I was born and I'm still a native Milfordian. And Milford, as you know, is split into Kent and Sussex, but I'm on the Sussex part of Milford. And I've grown here since I was born here. I went to public education at Milford High School, Milford School District, sorry. Then went on to get my bachelor's degree from the University of Delaware, and I went and got a master's degree from the University of Delaware last year. So I've been a first in many of my trajectories in my life, and I am so thankful for my parents and for the community that has fostered such a commitment in me and just believed in me and the support that has been given to me.
Awesome. And as I hear you talk, I know you answered, but I want to go deeper. Who are you, man?
Mm.
Who are you?
I like to say that, first of all, I'm a son of immigrants because that is really what defines me. My role, my circumstances, my challenges, and my barriers, but also the wisdom and the opportunities that have been given to me have been because of those lived experiences as a son of immigrants. My parents came here and they came here with nothing. They didn't know the English language. They pursued opportunities without really knowing the system. And for them to do that with no, degree, no language accessibility, is just an inspiration to me, and has been really what has driven me to do what I do now and serving my community in all aspects, right? From representing them on the Milford School Board when I was on the school board to, just in the workplace right now and serving in different capacities. I always bring that mentality that my community and my family needs to have a voice and an advocate.
So when the family gets together,
Hmm.
I just can imagine this when your parents and your elders and then those younger than you. What's that conversation like?
It's, I will say that just having, being part of a Hispanic family, we have a lot of cousins, a lot of tios. But I've always been one of the kids who always like to sit at the adult table because just having those conversations with the adults and understanding, what goes on in their daily lives. And some of my cousins would appreciate that. Some of them would be like, "Oh, you only want to sit with the adult kids and or the adults and not with us." But it's been one of those things where um, I've gained so much wisdom from just being with the adults at such an early age. And sometimes I do regret not having that childhood that I wish I had in a normal setting with.
Understood. Could you tell me when you realized that you wanted to serve in the capacities that you are serving, as far as being a leader within the community and representing the community?
I think it started at around when I was in elementary school when my mom and my dad didn't know how to speak English. So I was always, making the phone calls to the doctor's office to make their appointments, or I was, the one translating at parent teacher conferences, and just understanding that when my family, not just my parents, but other family members or friends needed some kind of translation support, they would, ask for me. And So I'd had to adapt my Spanish skills at an early age, and for that I'm very grateful because just knowing another language builds that community. And so that's when it got my mentality started thinking about, if not me, then who? Because there wasn't that representation. There weren't advocates in these spaces when I was growing up. Now it's gotten better. Have more regulations in place from the state. We have people actually in places of advocacy who are advocating for us, but still a lot of work to be done. And I just that's when it really, really started for me.
Talk to us about your time as a staffer for Senator Tom Carper. How was that experience?
So it was very nerve-wracking for me as a first gen. So it really started when I was at the University of Delaware. I was looking for opportunities to get experience in the workplace, and it was my last semester at UD, and I was looking for these opportunities. I found this internship in Senator Carper's DC office. I presented it to my parents. My parents were very just not supportive at the beginning because they were fearful that, me moving to a new city with no knowledge, no support there, that it was going to be very difficult for me. But I remember having this tough conversation with my father and just letting him know that, if I don't expose myself to these places or to these people, then I won't truly grow as a person. And so, um, after a lot of crying, a lot of thinking, and just having these conversations with my parents, I decided to make that journey to DC and establish myself over there for about 2.5 years. I started off as an intern. A rule about Capitol Hill is that everybody has to pay their dues.
That's
So
correct.
you start off at the beginning as an intern, and then you move up the career chain. And so I started off as an intern, and just getting this exposure to how the Senate worked, how Congress worked, how impactful it is for diverse members of our communities to have that ability to be there, because Capitol Hill inherently is such um, it, it's a place where not a lot of majority of people who are from lower class society or from diverse backgrounds have that opportunity to be there because it is so unaffordable to live there. And the networking and the opportunities to be there are so limited that everybody's competing against you. So um, when I moved up, I got promoted to being a staff assistant, so answering the phones from 9 to 6 p.m. Uh, and doing that 5 days a week, working myself up to becoming a legislative staffer. And as a legislative staffer, I worked on issues like homeland security, immigration, and foreign policy. Some of the things that really were natural to me because of my upbringing. And so I think just working with the senator, especially representing my state in DC, was just a very big opportunity for me that really opened a lot of doors when I came back to Delaware.
That is awesome. I heard you mention, and I want to point that out. If you can talk a little bit about that first gen,
Mhm.
how important? What does that mean to you?
First gen to me means opening doors for other people. It means being in most cases the first person to be in these spaces, but it is also an opportunity for first gen people to open the doors and make sure that those doors are open and remain open for those who follow them, because being a first gen means exposure. It means breaking barriers. It means trying out new things and opportunities, which can be scary and frightening, but can also or also can lead us to greater opportunities and experiences that we would not have had otherwise.
Man, so you understand? Well, I know you understand. You wear big hat, man. You carry a lot of weight in your shoulder, but you also have a phenomenal community supporting you. So
Mhm.
while you are away, getting acclimated to DC, what role did La Familia play in that?
So I always had that connection to my family, making sure that on the weekends I would try to make time to come back to Delaware to come see them at least, a couple of times here and there in the month, because there's some values in the American society that conflict with the Latino community. In the Latino community, we have the values of family, God, community, whereas in the American society, we have a style of individualism or career aspect goals, whereas in the Latino community, we're more like, yes, career is important, but so is your family, and so is God, and maintaining those relationships. And so it's always been a back and forth with me sometimes, understanding and being that first gen because of the new exposure to the to two different communities and lifestyles.
Awesome. And framing it in another way because I've been asking the same question. Why do you fight so hard for your community?
I think the reason that I've, you know, fight for my community is because there has not been enough advocacy, enough push, enough representation for Latinos at any parts of government, local, state, or federal levels. Our representation is low in all of these aspects. We don't have school board members who are Latino. We don't have city councilmen, people who represent us, or even state elected officials who look like us. And so when people don't look like us, they don't understand our experiences or share those experiences, or at minimum, appreciate our experiences and take them when they're legislating or when they're in these positions of power. It makes our policies not as effective to our community, if at all effective. And so we need these people, people like us in these positions, and that's why I fight so hard to make sure that our voices are heard.
So, question, even as question for you is this, and I know your heart is here in Sussex County, but I know you've already received the offers. Like, why are you choosing to stay here? Because you could be everywhere, anywhere in the United States, anywhere in the world. Why are you still choosing to stay in Sussex?
That's a really good question. And I've been, you know, pondering the idea when I first came back from DC to go back to DC because my mindset at the beginning was there's very limited opportunity for growth for me here. But after just understanding and appreciating the circumstances that a lot of us, especially the Latino community, were under the COVID-19 pandemic, there has been a lot of, I've been pondering a lot about the need for people like us in Sussex County, whether it's in advocacy, and education, and healthcare, and legal matters, anything like that. The COVID pandemic has really shown us and that representation really matters, and there's really opportunity for a lot of growth here. So my mindset has changed, and Sussex County continues to be a place where I think there is opportunity and growth, whereas people maybe from northern Delaware don't really appreciate that, right? Because they are more closer to the urban areas than we are here in Sussex.
Awesome. What are you currently reading right now?
Um, One of the things that I am reading, and I know I'm a little late to the game, is How to Be an Anti-Racist. One of those, uh, you know, one of the reasons that I started becoming more active in racial and social justice issues, besides my Latinx or Latino heritage, has been when I was on the school board, right? Serving on the Milford School Board, I saw that there was a disparity of among diverse students in graduation rates and retention rates and dropout rates, but nobody was really talking about this because the people at the table weren't really, understanding of the complex socioeconomic backgrounds that we have. Whether it's, the Latino folks, the majority of parents are working. They're working and most of their time is, devoted to making ends meet, whereas people from white communities are, ensuring that their kids are, being tutored or helping them with their homework. And so nobody was talking about these issues. And so when I first got on the board, that was one of my priorities, making sure that our policies were inherently, anti-racist, some of the things, for example, there wasn't a person who was in charge of equity solutions in our school district. So after advocating and pushing and working with the superintendent, we actually created a equity supports services coordinator whose main job was to ensure that we had equity among our students of diverse communities. And while the pandemic is a big continues to be a bigger factor as to why there was a lot of students dropping out or students are being not receive didn't receive the educational needs that they deserved. I think it's also to have a good understanding of anti-racist policies to make sure that we're working to better our community.
Thank you, man. Thank you. What is a quote that drives you right now?
A quote that I've always lived by is be the change you wish to see, because that's what really just drives me. When I don't see that there has been change, I always think about, who's going to make that change? Is it going to be me? Is it going to be somebody that I can, help develop to make that change? But change is necessary when you see inequities, and that is a quote that, has always been a favorite of mine.
Awesome. What is a question that you wish I would have asked?
Um, what is a question that you should have asked? I would say, why is it that the Latino community does not have the representation it has right now when we are 10% of the state's population and the biggest or one of the biggest economic drivers economically in the state?
Why?
So for context, immigrant households in Delaware, for example, have contributed millions in state and local taxes. In 2018, it was reported that about 228 million taxes were contributed by immigrant-led households in the state of Delaware. But people don't see us that way. People don't see us as economic drivers. I think there's a misconception or myth that we are taking away from the state in terms of resources or services. And that's a big misconception that we need to address. And a part of what we've done in terms of who we are is we have the Delaware Hispanic Commission who's leading this fight, which I've been privileged to serve as the vice chair of the commission, the youngest member on the commission, and I think it's important to make sure that we continue pushing our state and elected officials to have representation at the table. We don't have currently a Hispanic cabinet member or elected or state elected official at the state level. And we're pushing and working on advocating to make sure that we have at least a Latino in a space of leadership because we are ready. We are big enough as a community. We have the strength and numbers. And again, we're the economic drivers in our state.
And now that I thank you for that question and answer, another question for you: when that does become you, how do you make sure, right? Because as you said, there's not many, possibly none, serving in those positions. When that happens to you, how are you going to make sure? How do you make sure that you still stay connected
Mm-hmm.
to the community?
Yeah, that's a really
That's
good
tough.
question. That is
It
that
happens to a lot of us.
it does. I think making sure that you remain humble and retain your roots because a lot of us and when we receive positions of power, I think we tend to have a disconnect with the community that fostered us or made empowered us. But I think one of the biggest things for when we do have a Latino elected to these positions is that they need to maintain these conversations at the community level, right? Making sure that they're at town halls, that they're attending, community events, that they are well known in the community, and just remaining humble in that aspect because people can appreciate when you're humble about your circumstances and how you got to where you are, and just maintaining those ties because it is so important to make sure that while you are at the table, you continue representing your community and making sure that the door continues to remain open so that other future leaders can come after you.
And that's the key, right? How do we make sure that we are leaving the door wide open, or making it easier for others to join us
Yes.
in that fight? Because even in business, it's the same way, right? You
Yes.
start a business, become successful, but then after a while, you get to a point where you have to start saying no.
Yes.
Like right when as I hear you talk, all I keep thinking about it when I first started, right? You say yes to everything,
Yes.
right? So that's how you become known,
Yes.
and you serve everywhere.
So everywhere.
But the higher the position, the more focused you have to be, and then you find yourself struggling with, I'm gonna have to start saying no.
Yes. Exactly.
So how do we attract other members of the tribe, of the community, to follow in our footsteps, to hopefully plug up some of those holes?
One of the things I think is making sure that you're visible and that you're the ones who, for example, inspiring the community, right? I think one of the biggest reasons that a lot of people don't run for office, aren't involved in politics or elections, is because they don't see themselves in those spaces. They don't believe that those spaces are for them. They may believe that they don't understand the process, or that they're not smart enough to understand the process. But making sure that there are people like them in those positions is the biggest, I think, barrier, and I think the biggest key driver to making sure that we involve more people. And especially young people too. A lot of our immigrant-led households are, members of the older generation of Latinos. But the next generation is coming. The voting population, the 18-year-olds who will be eligible to vote. How do we inspire them to vote? Because it's not just they're going to turn 18 and they're not going to be interested in voting or just being aware of the social and political issues going around our state and our country. So inspiring them, communicating with them, and communicating effectively, making sure that we meet them where they are, because we can't just expect that the way that we're used to communicating with the public is how they're going to receive that information, right? Social media is a big influencer, and I think leveraging those existing and new tools will inspire other people to be in those spaces.
Thank you. Anything that I missed? Anything that I missed?
No, but I really, really appreciate the time and for being here and for you inviting me.
Gracias. Thanks for watching Your Sweet Sussex. And for more episodes, go to IamSussex.com.